You have Patrick Findaro here, co-founder at Vetted Biz. Today, I'm very excited to have on Brent Dowling. He's the CEO and co-founder at Raintree. Raintree is a franchise development firm. They've built and grown over 30 franchise concepts and sold 2,000 plus locations throughout the United States. He's also the chairman of a growing and emerging brewery concept, Voodoo Brewing Company. Brent, today, would love to just understand how you entered the franchise space, talk about responsible growth, because there are a lot of franchises that just go from 0 to 200 in a year, and then they close down the next year or run into financial issues. So would love to just pick your brain on everything franchise related and keep this as much of a discussion as possible.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And it's exciting to be here. I don't often get to speak to folks that are experts in franchising and love surfing and snowboarding. So being able to find that out from you today and talk to you today is a unique opportunity I'm going to relish.
Exactly. Yeah. You're in the mountains in Colorado. I'm here in Miami Beach. I was saying we don't get waves that often. So I picked up kite surfing about 10 years ago, but I'll make the trip up coast in Florida and then jump on a plane as often as I can to get surf trips in.
Yeah, I'll have to join you. We been trying to get to Mexico more from Colorado. As you'd imagine, not a ton of surf in Denver, but yeah, 3 hours and some wonderful waves too. So I know all about that.
Awesome. And you're originally from Australia, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I've been living in Denver now about 10 years, okay. But born and bred in Melbourne, Australia. I came out to Colorado as a competitive snowboarder, and that old story of meeting a girl and sticking around, and sure enough, here I am still. So it's been wonderful. I love living here in Denver. It's been a blessing.
Yeah, it's a great city, and it's definitely grown over the years. I'm sure a lot of companies moving there or opening up. So I can only imagine in the last 10 years how the city's boomed.
Yeah, like many cities, but yeah, I still drive on the main interstate and see a new building. It feels like every month. So yeah, wow. It's crazy here.
And how did you get into the franchise industry? So competitive snowboarder, you got an MBA after I understand, and then why franchising? How'd you get into it?
Yeah, like I said, actually is the girl kind of threw the wrench in the works. I was scheduled to go home, met her, and decided actually I kind of want to stay here. So once I got done, I was already doing a degree in international relations while I was snowboarding. So I wanted to get into diplomacy, and I luckily enough got a job at the United Nations. So moved to New York and did that for a while. But yeah, long story short, it wasn't really what I thought it was. And the glamour and allure of diplomacy wasn't quite where I wanted to.
You're not getting much done, right?
No, literally, I sat in a general assembly at the UN, and I literally watched 180 something countries debate the use of a period in a sentence or not for over an hour.
No way.
And I
grew up in Washington, D.C., and it's pretty bad there, but I haven't heard that.
Yeah. And there was a few little, I exaggerated a little bit for the sake of the story, but that was the basis of it. And a few of those issues kind of came along, and I realized I needed to do something else. And so, yeah, I went back to the drawing board, got the MBA, and while I was doing that, I came across this coursework in franchising. And like a lot of people, you're like, what's franchising?
Sure.
And you come to realize it's this trillion in, trillion out industry that is giant and affects almost everything, but no one really knows what it is. And so I was fascinated by it. And luckily enough, I saw an entry-level marketing job for an emerging popcorn franchisor retailer in Boulder, Colorado. And I thought back to that coursework, and I thought, you know what, this is $12 an hour, but I'm fascinated by it. I'm going to give this a go. And so I've been in franchising ever since. That's how I got there.
When you joined that first franchising company, how many locations did they have? And then by the time you left, what was it at, more or less?
Yeah, they had 5 franchises when we joined. I was hired as effectively kind of the marketing person to help kind of market the franchise. They hired a guy by the name of Mike Edwards to sell
Okay.
to those leads, the franchises to those leads. And yeah, together with the team, we took it from 5 to over 300 awarded in just over 3 years. And
Wow.
yeah, that at that stage, Mike and I were getting a little bit of interest from other franchises saying, hey, come and work for us. And after getting, a few of those in a row and realizing that we had quite a special relationship and we worked really well together and realized what we did was quite scalable, we thought, why just go do one concept when we can kind of help it multiple at the same time? And that's effectively how Raintree was born, out of Doc Popcorn with Mike Edwards as a co-founder.
So in terms of what exactly are you doing? Are you sourcing the lead, vetting the lead, getting them signed up with the franchise? What's kind of like a step-by-step, more or less, for, imagine there's some franchisors listening or folks that have 5 locations of a corporately managed. How do you plug in and really help them from A to Z? A being there's someone interested in the brand, and Z being like they're open, or at least a franchise agreement signed.
Yeah. So when we say we do it all, we definitely feel like we do it all. And so there's probably major buckets, right, of what we do and the process to make sure that we're bringing a consistent flow of good fitting franchise owners to the brands. The first step is a step that I see the majority of brands that I look at potentially bringing into our portfolio misstep on or skip over completely. And it's very common for new brands. And that's identifying the target franchise owner. We like to say, like, if you fish for everything, you'll get nothing.
Sure.
And that's what a lot of brands do. They'll have their franchise opportunity and just throw it out to hopefully anyone who's interested. And that's often not the best strategy. So we'll work with the brand and do the legwork to understand who's going to be a good fit in this brand and who's likely to be successful. And that's actually quite a lot of work. From there, we then do all the marketing. We create for every new brand about 80 pieces of marketing collateral to help advertise the franchise opportunity to the world or to the country. And then from there, we select and manage all the lead generation channels. So we know who we're going after. We know who's going to be a fit. We know we've got the collateral to put in front of that person. We then put those on the right channels, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google, SEO, PPC, and certainly working with some talented franchise consultants is a big part of the strategy too. So we manage all of that lead generation. From there, you get leads, and then we have a sales team and the sales department walk them through a 4 to 8 week education process. And we're really trying to identify and weed out those folks we don't think will be a good fit in that process. And from there, really, it's presentation to the brand at Discovery Day, and their role is to simply say yes or no. And if it's a yes, then we trust in them to do their thing. As I said before, get that person open and happy and profitable.
And it's usually what, a 10-year term, 5-year term for most of the franchises you work with? Yeah,
we don't have, we're a little bit weird. We don't have a term. For us, the number one thing is that we enjoy it. We have fun.
Yes.
And you probably get that. You're out looking for waves, and you understand the value in enjoying life. And that's a big part of everything we do at Raintree. So the last thing we want is for a brand who's not having a good time or really enjoying or seeing the value in the relationship to feel stuck with us.
Yeah.
So we simply don't have a term.
Okay, that's fair. And then how can someone has imagine a very nice restaurant concept. They've now running 3 locations in the Denver area. How can someone prepare that 3 location restaurant chain to be a franchise?
Yeah. So for brands kind of thinking about franchising, you're absolutely right. Like, typically the path or the journey is, I've got a location or a restaurant in your example, and it's profitable, so I'm going to open a couple more. And then when those concepts or brands see that the replication has been achieved, that the other locations are also profitable, then you've got to choose a growth strategy to continue going. And is that funding corporate locations across the country or your region, or is that through franchising? And for many brands, the idea of funding all those locations themselves is a terrifying one, and franchising becomes very attractive, of having partners invest in growing the location. So once they've made that decision, look, I have obviously a big proponent of franchise sales organizations.
Sure.
For most brands, it is a smart strategy if you don't already have the internal resources. I think even more so for setting up the franchise concept. You'll need to create an operations manual. You'll need to sophisticate the processes and systems that have allowed you to go to 3 units. You've got to start to do that with knowing that you're going to go to 10, 20, 100 or more. And then you'll need, the legal documents like franchise disclosure documents. And so the simplest answer is if you've made that decision that franchising is the right growth strategy for you, work with the experts to make sure that you don't misstep. And again, that's operations manuals, legal documents, and even the strategy in itself. And there's some wonderful companies out there that handle everything start to finish. We only work with brands once they've kind of gone through that process, found a couple franchisees, proven that the success is extended to franchisees, and that's where Raintree steps in. And typically I see those brands that have done that are the ones that have used pros, that have outsourced that initial setup work.
Yeah, and you hear about franchisors, at least in South Florida, that they're like not even using a franchise attorney on the FDD and all the compliance and the FDDs. And they basically got swindled by some smooth sales guy to say, hey, give me 40K and we're going to sell 100 locations. And fast forward 5 years, they have one sold location and they're in litigation.
Yeah, I see that
you
a
see
lot.
a lot of that. I don't know if it's a South Florida thing as much or it's happening nationwide, but you have a lot of, I guess, firms that do everything. And it's great that Raintree kind of splits off and it's like, okay, prove yourself. And then we'll get involved to really make that growth happen.
Yeah. And unfortunately it does happen at the franchise disclosure document level. I see brands that are paid, to your point, high 5 figures for documents from attorneys that aren't franchise skilled, that don't have the experience. And you can read the FD and realize that right away. That work needs to be redone. And even at the franchise development level, there's certainly, unfortunately, a few shops out there and folks that, to your point, will promise the world 100 units plus.
I've seen, there's a lot of franchise development firms that they don't have a track record of like growing any system beyond like 20 locations, and they'll have like 50 franchisors where
exactly.
You must know this much more than me, Brent, but like, is it profitable just to have 10 franchise locations or 20 franchise locations, or does the franchisor really need to grow to a certain level for it to make sense for time and money that they invest in this?
Yeah, absolutely. As the franchisor, I don't see how I could create a business with only 20 locations and make it profitable. And I'm working with a concept right now called Voodoo Brewery, and we've brought them. They had 9 already, and we've probably awarded another 20 already this year. So even at 30 franchisees next year, I don't expect that to be profitable at all. All of the resources, and then certainly much more, will be put into that system. And I think the number, loosely most brands will work off is getting to 100 units or more and achieving royalty sufficiency where the royalties are covering your recruitment costs, covering everything. And then you can start to look at building a profitable franchisor. But I think it's very hard to look at building a profitable franchisor business with less than 100 units.
Yeah, and what we see at Vetted Biz, we have analysts that are going through these franchise disclosure documents and going through the income statements of the parent company, the franchisor. And what we like to see is where royalties are where they're getting most of the money. And there's some pretty big franchise brands, including one from Australia that recently entered the US, where it's like 90% of their incomes from franchise fees. And it's like they're getting like 20 million plus a year. So I just question, like, how sustainable is that, where they're getting more compensation from selling a franchise rather than like actually providing the service and making sure their franchisees are a success?
Well, the lesson there is don't trust an Australian in franchising. Steer clear at all costs. But no, you're absolutely right. But it is tricky. Because here's the dilemma, right? You're absolutely right. It's nice to see those balance sheets. It's nice to see that replication. It's nice to see that the stability that you're entering into a franchise with solid royalties, which means the franchisees are making money and all those good things. Here's the challenge though. In my experience, really those life-changing returns, those returns on franchise investment where folks say this is the best thing I've ever done. It's opened up an entirely new avenue for me and my family. Really put them in an entirely new financial position that they didn't dream of possible. That group, that type of candidate, in my experience, it really happens in the biggest established franchisors, the safer bets.
Sure.
Because the downside of that is those primary territories are gone, fees are higher, all those things that we already know. And so it's a difficult proposition. It's tricky to identify the concepts that don't have those healthy balance sheets yet, but have all of the growth opportunity.
And I'm sure it's a transition where, the first couple years, they're getting funded more from their franchise fees, but there's got to be some switch eventually where then it goes on the royalties. But exactly. We're a big fan of emerging concepts because you have some large brands where it used to be like $300K to open up a major fitness franchise, and now it's 1.3 million. And you got to buy the equipment package from them. You have to do all these things, and it's like Quiznos. It was everything you have to buy from them. And there's other big groups where they're making a lot of money beyond the royalties. And if you're late to the party, you're probably not going to do so well. But if you were one of the first 100 or 200 franchisees and you took a prime market, you're probably doing pretty well.
Grandfathered in on all of the early FDD goodies, the lower royalties, etc. Yeah. And that's exactly why those bottom lines of franchise owners and emerging brands or early adopters, in my experience, tend to look a little better than the bottom lines of franchisees that join hundreds of unit locations that have, as to your point, all the new fees built into them and potentially not as good as territory. So
exactly. And how does a system grow at the right rate? Like, there's some great examples of businesses that went from 0 to 500 in just a few years, and they did it right, and they had minimal franchise closures and low transfer rate. But there's also systems that grew very fast that basically it imploded. So I'm curious to hear from you. How do franchise systems grow at the right rate, and what's too fast? What's too slow?
Yeah. So I think too slow, I see too slow a little bit. And too slow is some brands that are trying to do the right thing, which is tough. They really want to be responsible.
Sure.
And so they really cap the number of franchise owners to a low number each year that they want to bring in while they figure it out. The problem with that is if you're growing and you're bringing owners into the system, it's going to take resources. It's going to take almost the same amount of support services for 5 folks as if you had 20.
Scale.
Absolutely. And so the difference is if you're having to invest in bringing in support services for 5 folks versus 20 folks, you're not going to have the same amount of incoming resources as if you grow a little faster and bring that money in and put it to work for the value of that new group. And so I see a lot of franchisors, unfortunately, succumb to the grow slow, the grow slow and die model. And so there's certainly merit to the idea of grow fast. But to your point, that has to be done carefully too. Ultimately, I think that concepts really need to understand the growth strategy. You don't have to have the resources in place or make the hires or invest into the systems before you bring the growth, before you actually award the franchises, but you at least need to know what the milestones are and what the plan is. At 10, what are you going to do? What roles do you want to have in place? Who's going to support the different services that need, whether that's marketing, real estate, construction, training? And what does that look like at 50? And what does that look like at 100? And what's the plan in place? And the brands that I see that at least have a plan in place are the ones that can then grow quickly, bring in the resources and the capital they need to enact those plans and go. The concepts that just kind of come in. And we saw this one time, it was in our very first year at Raintree, but
sure,
we didn't know what we know now. And so we brought a concept in and we did 9 quick franchise sales in 4 or 6 months.
Okay.
Thinking that the franchisor got it. And very quickly, right after that, we saw the wheels fall off the bus. There was folks that couldn't find real estate and complaints about not getting return calls. And so we learned, look, you've got to really understand what the infrastructure is, what resources are in place, and does this brand have a growth strategy for what we're going to bring them? And so to recap, I just think you need a good plan. You need to think it through and put that plan in place. And it sounds so basic, but you'd be surprised how many brands just, let's grow, let's do it.
And what makes sense to look out? Like, is this a 3-year plan, 5-year plan that you sit down with the franchisors and say, at this number of locations, this is what your support staff looks like. When this happens, you're going to probably want to transition. This is based on the other 30 plus franchise clients we have.
Yeah, it depends on each brand. It's so variable, like, because we have brands that are service concepts that require less support services. And then we have brands that are pretty extensive retail concepts and restaurants that require a good amount of support. And so those plans and the amount needed vary. And so, we try not to impart too much of this is what it needs to be.
Sure.
Typically, the brands will kind of know, especially if they've grown the first few corporate locations and work with franchisees, what it actually takes to properly support someone. Yes. We're just there to give them the nudge to say, hey, continue to do that work of planning.
And then before taking on a franchise client or partner, you had mentioned, you want to make sure that they have a few corporate locations. They actually have some franchisees, kind of proof of concept. Do you also look at like the unit level economics to see that, okay, a franchisee that signs up with this brand has a good likelihood of success and providing for their family?
Yeah, we do. It's I would argue the most important thing that we do in evaluating a potential partner. We used to just look at the FDD and the item 19, right? And think that's probably enough. But we learned that sometimes that doesn't tell the full story. Another great learning in doing this along the way. So at Raintree, we actually request P&Ls of the locations, and we scour through those to really get the full story. And the good news is there's so many good franchise brands that we're looking at, certainly right now. Oftentimes they don't know some of the stories that they're sitting on and how they can best use that in their FDD and item 19 to better position themselves. So it's not all doom and gloom of we gotcha. A lot of the times it's you've got a really special thing here with these owners, and this is how you tell that story and grow that brand.
That makes sense. And how has your job changed and with the franchisors you work with COVID?
Yeah, COVID has been interesting. Last year was very interesting for our kid concepts, our retail, our restaurant concepts that got shut down. Certainly, a good amount of time where not many franchises were being sold, understandably. But I think to focus on this year, it's been outstanding. I think, like most brands and yourself too, Patrick, I'm sure you hear it every day as well, that the Great Resignation is real. Yeah. It's absolutely real. And folks got a taste during the pandemic of kind of creating a little bit of flexibility in their schedule and catching the kids' game or spending more time with the family in general, and not having to sit in an hour or two of traffic every day. All these things that people realized didn't necessarily need to be. And when they know what they want, which is not that, and they know that owning a business can give them the opportunity to have those things, but they know they don't have a good business idea, what's the only other option? One of the only other options, invest in a franchise. And so, most of the brands, if not all of the brands in our portfolio, are all having record franchise growth years.
Wow.
It's been incredible to watch, and we're excited. And I personally, I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I think that type of memory is not something that's short-lived. And I think the demand for franchising for good concepts is going to stick around for at least a few years yet.
So at Vetted Biz, we're all about data. We're mining a lot of information from the franchise disclosure documents. We've gone through now 2,100 brands, and we have different indicators that we're checking on a weekly basis too internally. I was just curious, Brent, for you and your team, are there specific KPIs or data that you're tracking daily or weekly to grow your business at Raintree and or grow the franchisors that you work with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think at both levels, you know, one of the big ones is ROI. We're always trying to track that. And people invest in franchises for flexibility and freedom, but nobody wants to lose money. People want to make money. So making sure we're understanding and our brands are understanding how we can reduce the time that it takes for a person to recoup their investment, and what are the things and what are the metrics that are going into that. That's really important. Again, when we like instructing our brands and coaching our brands on focus on unit level economics, you know, that's a variety of things based on the brand. Some brands are out there, you know, spending a lot of time on reducing cost of goods, on COGS, because that's going to drive the net profit for the franchisee higher. Some brands are figuring out partnerships, national partnerships, to bring down initial investment, because that'll help ROI. There's many things, and it's variable by brand, but I think the key is as long as there's a commitment there to be continually working on any of those things, whether it's driving more money, net profit, or reducing investment levels, etc. There's a lot of ways to go about it.
That's well said. And in another interview I did with your colleague Brian from Raintree, as well as the CEO at Footprints Floors, getting that location open right away. And I think that's a big benefit with the service brands, is you can open up within a month, maybe even less time, where for certain concepts, it's going to take a year or 18 months. So you might want to rethink opening a restaurant in Miami-Dade County where permits can take a year. So you're having that capital just parked for 2 years before you pass break even and can start collecting a return on your investment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, that works for a lot of people. A lot of people are attracted to the idea of a physical asset and are fine with the idea of gradually getting that open over a year while they keep their day job now. But you're absolutely right. The demand right now for service concepts, or concepts where I can get out of that cube, or I can stop driving in traffic in a month from today, let's do it. That's big right now.
Well, Brent, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to leave for the listeners? Many of them are potential franchisees. I'm sure there's going to be a handful of franchisors as well as prospective franchisors. Any information, and I think it was great what you just mentioned on the return on investment for the franchisee as well as the unit level economics. But is there anything you'd like to leave off for the listeners of this podcast and the viewers of the YouTube?
Yeah, I think at both levels right now, there's a genuine optimism for franchising, and I think there's right to be so. I think that the franchising model has been around for a very long time in this country, but it's never been needed more than now. I think, again, based on the environment, based on what people want out of their lives and where society is, franchising really is a solution to so much of what we're seeing right now that's making people unhappy, that's driving this great resignation. And I think for both franchisee and franchisors that are committed to not making just money, but solving those problems, allowing folks another opportunity, bringing local business to their communities that they can be proud of. And for franchisors, bringing in franchisees to their systems that they can really help change their lives. So long as your intent is right there, I think that this really is such an amazing time to be in franchising. And there's so many great opportunities out there. I think for the franchisee level, oftentimes you're seeing the fastest growing franchises, or the hottest franchises, or the franchises that you think would be perfect in your community to make money. I think, again, just think more about, you know, what your goals are, what your intent is, and be open to options in franchising that you may not have preconceived before. And I think that in those instances, they're the types of franchise owners that we check back in a year later, that really give, like I said before, those statements of, this has been life-changing for me and my family, and the best thing we've ever done. And so I think there's so much out of that right now, so long as you're careful, so long as your intent has been well thought through. And yeah, I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm sure you are too, Patrick.
Yeah, no.